I'm wondering if there's one thing that you see in good entrepreneurs, like if there's one sort of like skill set or trait or anything like that about truly great entrepreneurs, since you worked with so many.
It's hard to say. Like there's a great quote in the Brent Schlender book by Bill Gates where he goes, Brent, this book should be called the Don't Try This at Home book. He said, plenty of people have the asshole part down, not so many have the genius part down, right? So, which I think is a great quote because Steve Jobs was a genius. Bill Gates wouldn't tell you that, but he's a genius, and most people aren't. And so most entrepreneurs have delusions of grandeur and think they're geniuses, right? And most of them aren't. And so you'll probably get feedback along the way that tells you if you are kind of genius-like or not in some way, right? Now, the other thing about people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs is they're very persistent. And so they have skills that most people don't have. One of them is persistence. Two is, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, it's certainly true for Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, they really, really, really like to work. Did Steve Jobs have a lot of hobbies? I don't think so. Vegetable garden, He liked to work. On Saturday afternoon, he was doing email at home, right? He liked to work. So, people think they like to work, but most people don't like to work that much. They like to goof off, right? So, that's fine, but then you're not going to be like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, right? And then the other thing is, really persistent people do have a little bit, especially when they're young, a little bit of a capacity for self-delusion, right? Where they think something's dumb when it's not, and they think something's great when it's not, and they think other people's stuff isn't any good even if it is. And that's what keeps them going, because it's easy to talk yourself out of anything, right? I mean, it really is. And so there's this weird thing where you have to know exactly what your competition is up to, and at the same time think that there's no way they're as good at this stuff as you are, right? If that makes any sense, right? And so that's a thing that I would certainly say both Bill Gates and Steve. Bill Gates, they have announced Windows at the Windows on the World restaurant in New York City in the World Trade Center in 1983, okay? It didn't even ship till late 85, and it was a horrible product. Version 1.0 it didn't do anything. You could play reverse eye. Like, it didn't do anything. So, but he thought it was great, right? He told you it was great. So that's sort of self-delusion. It's not like Donald Trump, but you do kind of believe in your own stuff, right? Steve would always say this stuff was, he'd tell you we're working on that in the lab, and he hadn't even thought about it until you mentioned it, right? He was just bullshitting you, So the ability to have credible BS, credible meaning you can't dispute it and it will eventually come true, is very important. That's not like Trump, where Trump just lies like a little kid, right? He's like, oh yeah, I didn't do that when he did, and you can prove it, and So it's a weird thing, but most great entrepreneurs have it, right? The ability to get that something could be done, when it could be done, so might as well pretend it's done already, as opposed to just making it up like my daddy's a fireman or something.
Well,
and of course, you can't be a genius. I mean, both Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are geniuses in different ways. Steve Jobs loved the aesthetics of things. When I worked at Next with him, we'd go for a walk at lunchtime, and we'd just walk around the parking lot critiquing cars. We'd just walk around going, ugly, 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 pretty, pretty, ugly, now this doesn't work, I don't like the butt, for like an hour. It was like girl watching. We just do it for cars, right?
Well, and you've sat in on those breakfast meetings with Steve and Johnny Ive and these great design geniuses.
I used to go in the lab with Johnny Ive and Steve after lunch on Mondays. I go to Steve's staff meeting, I get a sandwich, and he and I, before we met with Avi and his team to look over Mac OS X, we'd go in the lab and hang out with Johnny. And they would go over, and I was really sleepy. I had to take a 6 a.m. flight every Monday morning to go to Apple. So I was getting up at 4:30, wolfing down coffee, going to the Seattle airport, flying to the San Jose airport, driving to Apple, sitting through a 3-hour staff meeting, and then following Steve around breathlessly. And I was dying. By 1:30, I was in a closed, hot, windowless room searching for caffeine. And Johnny and Steve will be talking about plastic extrusion. Like, dying. So we go over the iMac and the curve and the angle and the joint and the miter and all this crap. And then they'd be totally lost. And then they'd look at me and they'd go, what do you think? And I'd go, ship it, Where's the Coke machine? So, yeah, they were really into it. I mean, like, really into it.